Hello students, today we are going to talk about Educational Research Part 2. Introducing the part, Educational research is the research conducted to investigate behavioral patterns in pupils, students, teachers and other participants in schools and other educational institutions. Such research is often conducted by examining work products such as documents and standardized test results. As with other social sciences, educational researchers use a variety of qualitative and quantitative research methods. A standardized test is a test that is administered and scored in a consistent or standard manner. Standardized tests are designed in such a way that the questions, conditions for administering, scoring procedures, and interpretations are consistently scored in a predetermined standard manner. Any test in which the same test is given in the same manner to all the test takers is a standardized test. Standardized tests need not be high-stakes tests, time-limited tests, or multiple-choice tests. Components: multiple choice and true-false statements are often chosen because they can be given and scored inexpensively and quickly by scoring special answer sheets by computer or via computer adaptive testing. Essay questions. Some standardized tests have short answer or essay writing components that are assigned a score by independent evaluators who use rubrics, that is rules or guidelines, and benchmark papers, which says about examples of papers for each possible score to determine the grade to be given to a response. Purposes of research. Research is an activity that helps us generate knowledge. It helps us in testing the existing knowledge, and it also helps us in creating new knowledge. One may ask, why do we need more and more knowledge? This can be best answered by stating that research and the knowledge generated through it help us satisfy our curiosity and solve the problems we face. Human beings are born curious, and throughout our lives, we keep on seeking answers to questions that arise in our minds. Research is essentially the process of conducting disciplined inquiry. Research serves the following purposes. Number 1, generation of knowledge. Research helps us verify existing knowledge and, if necessary, generate new knowledge. For example, various theories of learning explain how human beings learn. Behaviorist theory of learning explains how habits can be formed and fears can be got rid of, but it does not fully explain how we learn language. Similarly, information processing theory explains how we process various types of sensation, how we make meaning of them, and what role our memory plays, how we store information, and how memory is organized. Research that leads to generation of knowledge is therefore very carefully planned and conducted in controlled situations. Such research is concerned with theory building and is known as basic research, also called as fundamental research. This type of research is very rigorous and is based on carefully selected samples and techniques. Number 2, the problem solving. In education, we confront a variety of problems. To give an example, what is the best method of teaching a language? How can children learn skills more efficiently? How can scientific creativity be fostered among children? How can students learn to think mathematically? How can children develop morally and develop concern for others? All these problems involve relatively more effective ways of promoting learning and development. Such problems can surely be attempted through trial and error, but we may not succeed at all through trial and error, or may take more time than is necessary. Research is essentially systematic inquiry, and it can help us discover more effective ways of teaching and facilitating learning. Research concerned with problem solving is also known as applied research. Most educational research is applied research because it is concerned with formulation of procedures and sequences of action to achieve our purpose, that is, solving problems that we encounter as teachers. Now, number 3, action in specific situations. Very often, classroom teachers encounter problems that do not allow them to perform as effectively as they would like to. For example, a particular teacher may notice increasing truancy in a class, or a teacher of English may find that students' attitude to the English language is far from positive, and as a result, they do not take interest in their English class. How to reduce truancy in my class would be the problem faced by teacher A, and how to make learners' attitude towards English more positive might be the problem confronted by teacher B. You must have noted that both these problems are not general education problems. On the other hand, these problems are faced by specific teachers in a specific class, in a particular school, of a particular town or a city. These problems are therefore localized problems. The concerned teachers may take appropriate steps to study the problem in detail and examine its causes, and finally may be able to solve their problems by themselves. Sometimes, 2 or more teachers from the same school or neighboring schools may exchange their experiences and help each other solve a particular problem. Such action in specific situations is quite systematic and the result of careful observation and analysis. Research that serves this purpose is known as action research, and it is now being increasingly used. Results of action research usually are not extended to other situations. Number 4, training of future researchers. Research also serves the purpose of preparing future researchers by providing them planned research experiences, which may be initially quite simple but later on become more and more complex. Surely, if research is to continue during the coming years, a new generation of researchers must be trained in time. As a student of this program, you will be working on a dissertation, that is, small-scale research, on a specific educational problem. This will provide you with first-hand experience of what activities are involved in research and what doing research feels like. MPhil scholars and PhD scholars in education also conduct research, which may be considered intermediate level and advanced level training for preparing researchers. Now, what is educational research? We now know that research is a systematic inquiry based on the scientific method and concerned with understanding, prediction, and control of phenomena. Educational research applies the scientific method for systematic study of educational situations. It seeks to help us solve educational problems. Like research in other disciplines, educational research is characterized by the following features. It is based on inductive, deductive reasoning, in which the researcher observes the phenomenon, formulates a logically sound hypothesis or a set of hypotheses, and tests its or their validity empirically. The validated hypotheses are again checked against new data through further observation. It is empirical in nature. In other words, educational research proceeds through systematic study of reality that can be observed, measured, and recorded. Third point is, it is self-correcting. Results of research that appeal to our reason today may be disproved by new data. This is so in spite of the fact that the researcher takes all precautions to avoid error. Further research in the same area would remove the error, if any. Thus, educational research, like research in other disciplines, is self-corrective. We have already examined two conceptions of social reality. Since education is one of the social sciences, we find that educational research uses both conceptions of social reality and the methods that are considered appropriate for exploring it. This explains why educational research makes use of the approaches used in scientific research as well as those used in social science research. The objectivist's approach to research is known as the positivist paradigm, while the subjectivist's approach to research is known as non-positivist or humanistic paradigm. A paradigm can be defined as a way of looking at a phenomenon or a broad perspective of it. A paradigm determines research approach and methods. Educational research uses methods derived from or based on positivist as well as non-positivist paradigms, depending upon the nature of the problem being investigated. We will study various major types of studies in educational research a little later. We may conclude by saying that educational research is concerned with issues that engage the attention of teachers and educationists. To quote Travers, the scientific goal of educational research is to discover laws or generalizations about behavior which can be used to discover, to make predictions, and control events within educational situations. Travers said this in the year 1964. Advocates of the humanistic paradigm would take the stand that educational research should help us understand how humans learn and behave in educational settings for learning or performing educational tasks. Now on scope of educational research. Educational research covers a vast territory and it can be looked upon and classified in many ways, chief among which are the following. Classification by levels of education is number 1. This classification would result in research in preschool education, research in primary, secondary and tertiary, which is higher level of education. Under research on secondary level and tertiary level education, we have research studies on face-to-face education and on open and distance learning. Number 2, classification by curriculum areas. This classification results in research studies in various areas of school curriculum. Example, language education, science education, maths education, social sciences, including environmental science education, art education, business studies education, etc. Under each of these, there exist many sub-areas. For example, language education research could deal with teaching of the first language or second language or foreign languages. In the context of Hindi, a first language for many students, research studies could be conducted on teaching grammar, teaching poetry, teaching reading comprehension, and teaching writing skills, to name some of the major aspects. In teacher education, we have curriculum areas like philosophy of education, sociology of education, history of education, educational psychology, educational technology, peace education, value education, and human rights education. Research studies can be conducted in all these areas as also in pre-service teacher education and in-service teacher education. Number 3, classification by research methods used. Educational research may be classified according to the research method used in a particular research study. Such classification will yield types like experimental research, historical research, survey research, ethnographic research, developmental research, and case study research. However, even these 3 schemes of classification do not completely account for the entire variety of studies in educational research. With the passage of time, new priorities in educational research lead to new areas of research. When the first survey of research in education in India was published in 1974, the entire research conducted till 1970 was classified under 17 headings, but 23 years later, when the 5th survey was published in 1997, the variety in research studies generated 38 headings. It is hardly surprising that during the intervening 23 years, about 25 new areas in educational research had emerged and substantial quantity of research had been carried out in each area. Teaching constitutes a macro area in educational research. Let us examine the changes that took place in research in teaching during the period 1963 to 1986. The year 1963 marks a watershed in research on teaching because it was during this year that N.L. Gage's Handbook of Research on Teaching, also known as the first handbook, was published. The year 1986 witnessed the arrival of M.C. Whitrock's third handbook of research on teaching. It should be interesting to examine the new areas that appeared in research on teaching during these 23 years. Gage's handbook lists 23 areas, whereas Whitrock's handbook covers 35 areas. It is not the difference in the number of areas that impresses us. Far more interesting should be the changes in areas in terms of new trends and changing priorities, because changes in research in teaching called for an entire new scheme of classification of research studies. Now on types of studies in educational research. Studies in educational research are categorized under two broad headings: A. Quantitative studies, and B. Qualitative or non-quantitative studies. Qualitative studies are also called as descriptive studies by some researchers. A brief description of these types of research studies is given below. Let us begin with experimental research. Experimental research in education is concerned with the investigation of cause and effect relationships in educational events. Variables related to cause must precede those related to the effects, since in terms of time, the cause variables occur first. They are also known as antecedents, while effect variables are called consequents. In experimental studies, the researcher observes what happens if an antecedent is varied under control. The effect is examined on another variable or a set of variables. The variable which is varied is also known as the independent variable, while the variables on whom the effect is measured are dependent variables. Issues like which method of teaching is more effective in promoting students' learning in a particular subject are settled through well-designed experimental studies. Number 2. Quasi-experimental studies. The literal meaning of quasi is seemingly but not really. Thus, research studies that do not use a truly experimental design are called quasi-experimental studies. Since educational research is carried out on human beings who are, unlike objects, quite changeable, and controls cannot be exercised absolutely, therefore, much of experimental research in education is quasi-experimental in nature. This type of research investigates the same issues that experimental research does. The difference is only in terms of the manner in which an experiment is designed and conducted. Now, number 3, the correlational research. Correlation means going togetherness. In other words, correlation between two variables tells us about the relationship between them. For example, if we know how achievement in mathematics X is related with achievement in science Y, then on the basis of marks in X, we can predict the marks in Y and vice versa. Variables may be positively related with one another. Example is, high achievement in mathematics is associated with high achievement in science. Or the correlation may be negative. To give an example, high achievement in maths is associated with low achievement in art. Or the correlation may be 0. Again an example, high achievement in maths is sometimes associated with low achievement in art, sometimes high achievement in art, and sometimes even with average achievement in art. Correlation can vary between 0 and 1 and is expressed in terms of direction as well as magnitude. To give the example, it varies between plus 0.91 minus 0.23 plus 0.53, etc. Unlike experimental research, which aims at discovering cause-effect relationship among variables, correlational studies are concerned with problems like what is the relationship between educational achievement and levels of anxiety. However, the correlation must not be interpreted to mean that one variable is the cause of high or low measure of the other variable. Frequently, there are other factors that influence both of the variables under consideration. Correlation is always relative to the situation under which it is obtained, and its size does not represent any absolute natural fact. It is relative to the circumstances under which it is obtained and should be interpreted in the light of those circumstances. Correlational studies enable us to predict one variable from another or many others. Correlational research helps us explore and understand the phenomena, and thus it can prove helpful in theory building. Now we'll talk about descriptive research. Descriptive research investigates what exists. If it is conducted on large samples through surveys, it is called survey study. It may also be based on detailed and comprehensive study of just one unit of population, that is, just one case, thus resulting in a case study. Descriptive research may examine how various aspects of human development, example, intelligence, attitudes, social development, moral development, or skills as cognitive skills, social interaction skills, etc., develop in groups of persons of the same characteristics. Such studies are called developmental studies. Similarly, analysis of documents related to a particular aspect or area of education, to give example, religious and moral instruction, value education, etc., is collectively known as documentary analysis studies. All these are part of descriptive research. But ethnographic research is just the opposite of experimental research. In the latter, research is conducted through carefully controlled experiments, but in the ethnographic research, the emphasis is on naturalistic, that is, totally without control, field studies. Ethnographic studies typically describe events that occur in the life of an educational group or a society with respect to social structures and behavior and perceptions of the individual members. Thus, ethnographic studies collect primary data, that is, facts as they occur, and then interpret its meaning. Ethnographic studies use both participant as well as non-participant observation for collecting and recording primary data. Now to talk on historical research. Historical studies are concerned with the study of what was. They try to determine, evaluate, and understand past events primarily for the purpose of gaining a clearer understanding of the present and a better prediction of the future. Historical research thus seeks to provide a perspective on the past so that we may be able to understand the present and the direction the course of events would take in future. Historical research is obviously useful in understanding the trends and the problems associated with educational developments during a particular period of time. Historical research can also help us understand well-established educational systems like the one we have in India. Philosophical research. Philosophical research studies in education can be taken up under historical research. These studies usually deal with philosophical aspects of education, that is, related to knowledge and acquiring knowledge, metaphysical, that is, related to reality aspects, or axiological, which means that which are concerned with values, aspects of the education process. Philosophical research is basically interpretive in its approach, and it involves careful definition of the terms and processes. Before I wrap up this session, here is a brief summary of what we have learnt from this lesson. To conclude, research purifies human life. It improves its quality. It is search for knowledge. It shows how to solve any problem scientifically. It is a careful inquiry through search for any kind of knowledge. It is a journey from known to unknown. It is a systematic effort to gain new knowledge in any kind of discipline. When it seeks a solution of any educational problem, it leads to educational research. Curiosity and inquisitiveness are natural gifts secured by humans. They inspire humans to quest, increase their thirst for knowledge and the truth. After trial and error, people can work systematically in the direction of the desired goal. The adjustments and coping with situations make humans successful in their task. Thereby, they learn something, become wise, and prepare their own scientific procedure while performing the same task for second time. So, is there any relationship among science, education, and educational research? Research is the voyage of discovery. It is the quest for answers to unsolved problems. Research is required in any field to come up with new theories or modify, accept, or nullify the existing theory. From time immemorial, it has been seen so many discoveries and inventions took place through research, and world has got so many new theories which help the human being to solve his or her problems. Graham Bell, Thomas Edison, J.C. Bose, John Dewey, Skinner, Piaget, research like have given us theories which may cause educational progress. Research needs expertise.